Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in the Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we've got a treat today because we're going to take a look at a game played between Ceres and Stockfish, played on Navratil's channel in the AlphaZero 21. I had a mail exchange with the author of Ceres who reassured me that the video that I'd done about installing Ceres is actually okay, so if you want to use this engine, do take a look at that. It's in our engine technology video series. And he also shared this wonderful game with me. So it's the AlphaZero, so it's using openings that Jeroen and I designed for the TCEC Super Final, but it's pitting other engines within them, and this time Ceres took on the mantle of trying to take on the mighty Stockfish. So the game started d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, g3 castles, bishop g2, d6, knight c3, knight c6, castles, bishop g4, and this was one of Jeroen's openings. d5 and knight a5. So I mean, just in general terms, looking at the opening, I mean, risky plans like bishop g4 together with knight a5. Bishop g4 tempts the d pawn forward by putting some pressure on the d4 pawn, and then after d5, knight a5, you're hitting the pawn on c4. These are really effective if it ends up inconveniencing white's development a little bit. So for example, if white plays knight d2, for example, to protect the pawn on c4, then it blocks in the bishop on c1. Or if white plays a move like queen a4, then the queen's a little bit misplaced, vulnerable. I mean, there's some sort of compensation there. But white players realise that actually you can just play the move b3 to defend the c4 pawn. And yeah, the knight on c3 is a little bit loose, but tactically it all hangs together pretty well for white. And then in that case, well, you just start to see really the disadvantages of the knight on a5. On the side of the board, doesn't have an easy path back to activity. And you don't really see that many of the advantages. I mean, despite that, black's not lost in any way or anything. But yeah, I mean, black's got to tread carefully from now on because things could go wrong. So c5 was played, and then this move, bishop g5. And bishop g5 is really unusual in actual fact, but very, very logical and good. It's I mean, after c5, one of black's main ideas for counterplay is to play a6 and b5, and well, when you develop the bishop on g5, playing knight d2 now is just perfectly fine because knight d2 is not blocking a bishop on c1. The bishop's been moved out of the way, so it's a very nice logical development. And also another black idea is actually to play e6. And of course, having the bishop on g5 here, well, obviously perfect against a plan like e6. It just activates a pin on the knight on f6 against the queen on d8. I mean, black can play the move h6 to chase away the bishop, but well, the bishop can move back to a square like d2, and then we're going to have moves like, for example, queen c1 at some stage, gaining a tempo on the pawn on h6. It's always going to be one of those useful tactical ideas. Or for example, if the bishop moves away, then the h6 pawn is hanging. Those sort of things, they always end up being useful. So after bishop g5, Stockfish played a6 indeed, h3. Yeah, again, it's one of those things about the risky development of the bishop on g4. It had its purpose to force the pawn to d5, but here it's not really doing that much. And h3 is actually quite useful. I mean, a bishop can go back to e3 without allowing knight g4. So it's yeah, I mean, from that point of view, black's losing a few tempi. Now, black actually played the move bishop c8 here. Looks a little bit odd, but the idea is simply to meet e4 with knight d7. If you played the bishop back to d7, for example, e4, I mean, e5 is coming in pretty quickly and it's quite dangerous. So you might have to play knight to e8, for example, but that's not a great. It doesn't look great, really. So bishop c8, e4, knight d7 is a little bit more logical, but well, you can obviously see, that black's struggling already. I mean, these these pieces, all these moves that black's making, it's not great. But keeping control of these sort of positions is really, really difficult. And Ceres does an amazing job. And I'm going to be, unfortunately, I'm going to be maybe a little bit critical of Quivisto 7.13 in these, because well, it's my favourite engine for running matches against Stockfish at the moment. I'm running the very latest version of Stockfish, the mysterious, perhaps 15 elo gaining one at long time controls. Yeah, I mean, Quivisto's finding it pretty tough. But yeah, I mean, great games, great interest. But yeah, I think, you know, you're kind of going to start seeing, yeah, kind of the difference still between, you know, the really top godlike engine Stockfish and yeah, an engine like Quivisto, which is just super, super strong, but just not quite at the same level. So Queen D3 played by Ceres here. So just protecting the knight on c3, protecting c4, b5, rook b1, and this is a lovely move. I mean, b4 was threatened, you know, with this pin on the h8a1 diagonal, so, you know, you have to move the rook, but it's just lovely anticipation. You know, you're just saying, okay, if b takes c4 is played, then my rook is ready on b1. If black decides to close the queenside with b4, then you'll simply move the rook to another square later. You know, it's just it's beautiful anticipation, just working out, you know, what could happen and how do I want to be prepared against it. So knight b7 played by Stockfish, and I mean, one very impressive thing about Ceres here is that Ceres never takes ever looks at grabbing this b5 pawn. Which is something that Quivisto did quite a bit. I'll just show you what happened there. So, you know, queen c2, rook e8, h4 from Quivisto, queen c7, c takes b5. This happened in quite a few games. Queen a5, b takes a6, takes, and then rook fc1, bishop b4, rook c2, and you know, in principle, this is a pretty good benko for White. You know, I mean, White's quite nicely set up with the pieces here, and yeah, I mean, decent control. But still, you know, frankly, even not very good benkos are just very, very difficult to put away for White. And well, after f5, very typical move from Stockfish here, takes bishop e4. Somehow, you know, Stockfish just all of its tactics came out here, and yeah, you know, this was quite a yeah, difficult position really. It's I mean, White's definitely a little bit better. I mean, the exchange down, but two bishops, two pawns, and you know, a passed a pawn. But you know, Stockfish holds these sort of positions without blinking really. So you know, it was this was not the best line, I think, you know, and simply you see the counterplay that black generated there compared to what he gets in the game, the way that Ceres plays it, and well, you know, you understand why. Yeah, you really understand the quality of what Ceres did. So knight d2, queen a5, and then rook bc1. And again, you know, I like this idea, the way that White's played rook b1 and then rook c1, just reacting nicely. Oh my goodness, that's classic Ara against, oh, Halogen, my goodness. A Stonewall Dutch being won by Classic Ara. Impressive. So just rook bc1, you know, just adjusting to the situation. And of course the idea is if b takes c4, knight takes c4 will come with tempo, you know, so that's pretty good. Now e7 is hanging, so rook e8 is played, and now the move f4. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first impressive stage as well. I mean, when in my games with Quivisto, so this is on my 94 thread machine, playing at 20 minutes plus 5, so not a long time control. So that might be playing a part. But Quivisto was playing much more quietly, you know, with rook c2 and bishop e3. You know, really very quietly there, and actually Stockfish was managing to hold these positions amazingly enough. I mean, actually Stockfish barely lost the game against Quivisto in this whole series of you know, 60-70 games played in this line. But what Ceres does is straight away go for f4. You know, really trying to make the most of it straight away. And well, what's the point? F6 played, bishop h4, and then the move knight d8 from Stockfish. So Yeah, I mean, what is Stockfish aiming for here? Well, knight's coming round to f7, and then maybe we're going to just try and get in g5. You know, maybe somehow prize this pawn away from the defense of e5, get some squares for the pieces. You know, it looks really, you know, primitive and amateurish almost. But yeah, it's not easy at all to break through. And again, you know, Koivisto was really playing quite slowly in this position, and somehow Stockfish was just getting, you know, enough time to organise his defences. And to be honest, I wouldn't really guess in this position that White really does need to play quickly in order to make the most of its advantage here. And so this was, you know, quite an eye-opener for me. But g4 was played, g5, and then this fantastic move e5. I mean, what was the idea of g5 from black? You know, the idea is simply that after takes, we can bring this knight into e5. You know, there's all these dark squares are there. You know, you've really got a chance of really holding your position very strongly just on the dark squares. You're a pawn down, but it doesn't really matter. And you know, this knight's coming to f7. You can maneuver your knights as you want all around those dark squares. You know, it's really going to work well. So e5 is a very typical idea. You know, the idea is that you force a black pawn to occupy e5, and then you take the pawn. You know, this sort of thing, well, it's a completely different story, of course, if black can't get a piece onto e5. But yeah, I mean, the slight twist here is that after e5, you're just giving away the piece on h4. And now you play e6, and I mean, this is just fantastic, you know, positional judgment, really. The basic idea is that, you know, this whole pawn structure, this really cuts black in two. Because you know, there's a limited number of pieces that can come to the black king side, but all of these are just so far away from helping them. So actually, there's big possibilities for White here now to have a gradual big build up against the king side and then break through. But actually, you know, it's really not as obvious as you might think. Again, you know, I'd have the tendency here to think, oh well, you know, this must just be winning for White then. But again, you put you know, a number of Koivisto against Stockfish games, and you see Stockfish holding this somehow, and you suddenly realise that there are still, you know, some very precise points to be dealt with here. So King h1, lovely slow here. White is just going to play the move g5 and at some stage to open up the king side. So putting the king on h1 gets it out of possible checks along this diagonal, and also of course make sure that the rook can come to g1. So rook a7 and f5, really cementing that. And yeah, what's the idea? We're going knight d4, we're going g5. That's what's coming in next. But now Stockfish starts to fight, and Ceres has got to really show all its quality here, because knight d7 is played. Now, what's the idea? Well, in my games between Koivisto and Stockfish, then Koivisto was waiting for a move and then taking on d7. Rook takes d7, and then playing quite slowly with rook c2, you know, just a gradual build-up. And then what Stockfish was doing in these positions, giving away the pawn on h4, no worries, but playing the bishop to h6. And what you notice is that White's next break is not particularly obvious. I mean, g5 is completely under control, and we've got e5 for the knight, and well, we've also got, you know, even the b file for the rook. And somehow Koivisto was just not managing to make any inroads here. You know, the knight comes to e5 at some stage. We're getting a3 in. Yeah, what can you say? I mean, you don't really see you know, any particular easy way for White to proceed there. So what Ceres did was something that shocked me completely, I have to say. Just knight ce4. So letting the black knight come onto e5 with gain of tempo, just leaving it somehow. But of course, you know what you're keeping. You're keeping this this pawn phalanx here, and again you're keeping this splitting in half of the queen side and the king side. So yeah, knight c4. We really are aiming for g5 now. And yeah, I mean, this is really it's just really impressive stuff here. So I mean, knight df7 was one idea that Koivisto tried, which was very, looks very good, right? I mean, you're trying to do exactly the same thing that Stockfish did. So you've got a knight on f7, and you want to try and stop g5 from happening. Only the way that that Ceres has done it here is that you are ready to go g5. You had your knight on e4 already before black managed to get a knight on f7 and a bishop on h6 as well. And after rook f8, knight f3, b takes c4, g6. Well, we've just got Stockfish powering through here. This is a lovely move. Rook takes c4, knight takes h4, knight g3, and well, we're attacking e7. We're threatening knight h5. This is horrific for black, and yeah, black didn't last long here. So after queen e2, Stockfish played h6 in the game against Ceres. And Ceres just played the move knight f3. So, it's a theme that we've often said, remove the opponent's active pieces, that knight on e5, leave him with passive pieces. And that's exactly what Ceres is doing. Knight f3, bishop f3, rook f8, rook g1. And, yeah, I mean, if you don't do anything at all with black, well, there's various options. But I think that rook g2, rook g1, and then g5, followed by another piece sacrifice on g5, and it's completely over. It's and again, it's that cutting in half of the king side and the queen side that's playing its role there. So knight f7 was played, and now Ceres plays it very nicely here. Yeah, you don't want to allow this knight into e5 or even to g5, to try and block stuff up. So now Ceres does take the piece back. And you might say that, okay, well, this, and then from here it's a win. But actually, still in these games between Koivisto and Stockfish, Stockfish was managing to hold all these with black. And it's really only the plan that Ceres played that, that is good for white. And it's quite amazing, really, because, so played queen e3, just giving away this a2 pawn, no worries. But, the threat of g5 is in the air there. Rook b7, and now a great move, bishop e2. The idea being that if takes, you're going to take back with a bishop on c4 there. Queen a2 played, knight d2. And to be honest, if I'm looking at this position, I don't, just like this, without knowing what happened in the rest of the game, I don't really understand what's happening here at all. But b takes c4, played bishop c4, rook a1, chase the queen back, and now knight f3. And this is the key idea. This is the key piece configuration that Ceres was looking for. Bishop on c4, acting like a big pawn, holding the d5 and the b3 pawn, but that's great, that's really good. And then this knight now is going to take this pawn and come into g6 and really tie down these black pieces. And then, what have you really got left in this? Well, essentially, this bishop on c8 doesn't have much scope, and this bishop g7 is completely killed. We've got an e7 pawn that we can attack. It's not trivial by any means to put an engine like Stockfish away from this position. But white is in complete control. And of course, this is the sort of position that these amazing neural nets play incredibly well. This is always the type of position that they are going to win, even against Stockfish. So this is the first pawn that goes, the a pawn. Then we just come back to the f4 square. No rush at all, and now h4. And, well, g5 is a possibility. We don't need to rush with that. We can try all sorts of things if we want, just to hint at it. So rook fg2, rook f8, queen h3. Look at that. Look at that packing of pieces. And, yeah, I mean, g5 is obviously going to be a huge threat here. So rook h8 played by Stockfish. We have seen this so often, even in the good old AlphaZero Stockfish 8 games. This idea of defending against a break by putting the rook, on h8, putting the king on g8. But yeah, I mean, Ceres just maneuvers around and just keeps on getting its pieces into better and better squares. So here we get the exchange of queens. And why the exchange of queens? Well, the idea is to be able to play this move. So we're really dominating this bishop completely, and we'll also have bishop e6 at some stage. Remove the active pieces, leave black with the passive pieces. If we leave black with just the dark squared bishop against this knight, then it's going to, it's just going to be appalling. So king h7, h5, no g5 break now. Ceres has realized that it doesn't need it. It's just playing all these moves just to consolidate its position. Bishop e6, rook e4, knight h3. Well, we can pick up the exchange when we want it as well. Rook a5, rook a3. We could just win this in multiple ways, but again, you know, what Ceres doing is just beautiful. You know, all these pieces are so passive, and we're just playing to exchange off the active rook here. That's what we're doing. So this one went, and this one went, and well, I mean, look at all that material that that disappeared. This game didn't last much longer. That was just the desperation from Stockfish. But I mean, an absolutely, you know, coruscating game from Ceres, and I mean, I think you know, I also learnt an awful lot there because you know, I think if I just played through this game without running any of my engine matches between Stockfish and Koivisto, I would have just said, oh yeah, you know, nice game, but you know, obviously crushing after move 15, 16. It's only when you see just you know, the way that that Stockfish manages to defend against yeah, just a slightly less fantastic engine, that you suddenly realise, you know, just how well Ceres had to play in order to put this away. Just leave you with a final little treat here, because I got, you know, again, Stockfish played some quite amazing games with White, you know, in these positions, and I'll just show you one of them. So back in f4, f6 was played in the game, but b4 was also played in some of my games, and then knight a4, knight f8, e5, h6. E6, again, you know, Stockfish doing to Koivisto what Ceres did to Stockfish. HG and f5, and again, you know, it's this phalanx of pawns just cutting the black position in half, you know, and although black's got an extra piece, you know, just yeah, just so little opportunity to defend properly. So king h1, king g7, e takes f7, rook d8, knight e4. Bishop f6, f takes g6, knight g6, and now the sacrifices start. Rook takes f6, takes, knight takes f6, and I mean, in actual fact, you know, I mean, you know, black's going to be a rook and a piece up after king f6, but of course, you know, look, rook and piece, and also queen. What are they doing? It still looks like white's got more pieces in the attack, but you know, I mean, this is really, really amazing. You know, queen f3. Yes. Oh, classic Aris drawn after being so much better. Oh my goodness me! Another escape. Another escape for. Oh, it's allowed perpetual. My goodness. G takes f4, g4, queen e4, queen c7, f5, and you know, you're really thinking, but you know, is this really possible? I mean, you don't seem to have that many pieces in the attack, but you know, you just bring everything in. The knight comes into b6. We get rook f4, and yeah, I mean, we've just got ideas like queen h4 check, rook g4, and black just cannot keep white at bay here. But you know, it really is quite amazing. This is a great move, you know, just bishop f1, and if queen f1, I think rook g1 was the idea, and then we're just going to finish off afterwards with queen h8 check, rook g7. Despite all that material for black and a check, you know, just no way for black to defend. I mean, it's absolutely amazing play. And yeah, knight a5 was played, queen h6, rook g7, queen h8, and amazingly enough, you know, I mean, that's, you know, all credit to Koivisto here. It managed to get off to this endgame where it's 2 pawns down, but of course losing. But I mean, these were the sort of games that that I was getting in my engine games. But again, you see the amazing play that's required to put it away. So you know, what I'm taking away from this position is a much better appreciation of defensive resources, and also yeah, a better appreciation of how precise white needed to be at this crucial moment to really, you know, find the idea to get a huge advantage. And yeah, I've seen a number of games in the past with, you know, where the board is sort of cut in half, and that you manage to split black's armies in half. But it's you know, they've always been games I've greatly admired, and this one is fantastic. So there we are. I mean, do take a look at this video on how to install Ceres, and do give Ceres a go, because I think it's a fantastic engine with yeah, a massive future as well. So you know, absolutely brilliant stuff. Thank you, Navratil, for running all those games. Thank you, David, for you know, pointing this game out to me. I hadn't seen it at all, and I'm so glad I did. And well, everyone, why not give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, have a look at my book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, and yeah, I mean, otherwise, you know, please do keep on watching these videos. Hope to see you at the next one.